Wow, that's kind of a hard act to follow. And that was Randy up there, right? Randy Commissar in your picture. So I have my own ex-offender story. I was serving a 14-year sentence at the World Bank in 2000. And I sent an email to a guy that was on that slide, Randy Commissar, in 2000, and I said, Randy, my life's going nowhere. I don't mean to make light of the situation, but I had spent 14 years or 15 years in a very prestigious thing, and I was labeled as a world banker, as an expert. And I said, Randy, this is not working, and we have to reimagine the way international development happens. And Randy sent me an email. He's like, go for it, man. So I quit the World Bank 2 weeks later. That was 15 years ago, and that's how my life started, and that's how I ended up being here. So a lot of these things are connected. And congratulate you guys. I need the con body and that fried chicken. I was like, the food was good, so last night, but it wasn't what she was talking about. Okay, so. I'm in a better mood now, but last week I was really pissed off. And I was pissed because I had been traveling in Asia, trying to take some time off. I was offline for like 2 or 3 weeks for the first time since I sent that email to Randy 15 years ago. And I got back, and my assistant said, Dennis, I've booked you at a conference, a BIF conference. And I was like, oh, I can't believe it, Sarah. Why would you do that? And she said, so I was kind of throwing a fit, and she said, don't worry, it's just a panel discussion. It's just a panel discussion. So I was like, okay, panel discussion. I can do panel discussion, no problem. So she said, you just need to talk to this guy, Saul. I kind of remember the name. Talked to him on the phone. This is literally a few days ago. And I think Tori was on there or whoever else. And I said, he said, what's your plan? And I said, my plan, as it is with all panel discussions, is I just always go last. And I wait until see what other people say, and then I say something clever at the end, and that's it, and I don't have to do any work. Saul's like, I got some bad news for you. And I said, what's that? He said, you're on stage by yourself for 15 minutes, so you better get your butt in gear and do something interesting. So I went back and I was just like really ticked off at my assistant, Sarah, and I just gave her a blistering talking to about getting me into the situation. And she's like, Dennis, just relax. You've got I'm doing a TED Talk type thing tomorrow. She said, why don't you just practice your TED Talk the day before at the BIF conference? And I was like, that's genius. That's fantastic. So I was happy again, and I hugged Sarah instead of yelling at her. And that's what I was, that's what I was going to do. As I was flying down here, and I said, I'm going to just give this TED Talk, and it'll be good practice. And plus, I said, it's so funny, I packed this thing. I said, for the first time, I'm going to wear a hoodie on stage. Because that's what, like Silicon Valley, all these guys, you got to wear a hoodie. So I was like, I'm going to wear a hoodie on stage and give my TED Talk. And so this is my plan. I was so happy when I flew in yesterday. And then, unfortunately, I went to dinner at Saul's house. And I started talking to people there, including people on the board. And I was like, what is the deal with this BIF conference anyway? And they said, what are you going to talk about? And I said, well, I'm trying to decide. And they said, I said, what should I talk about? And they said, well, it doesn't matter. It's just the most important thing is that it be authentic, candid, concise, real. What other words did they use? Humorous. And I was like, oh, crap. I kind of took my slide. These are my TED slides for tomorrow, by the way, and I just kind of like, not those. And I thought, this hoodie also, it's kind of pretentious. It's not exactly me, even though I wanted to pretend like I was that way, so I decided I had to take off my hoodie as well. And so I'm sitting there trying to think about what I should talk about, and I said, so tell me, what's a good example? And they said, just tell stories about your life. And so I was trying to think of a story, and I thought, I'm going to tell them about the time that I met the Dalai Lama. And so so then I'm talking to Ellie, that's the Ellie up there, and she's like, for God's sake, don't talk about the Dalai Lama, that's what everybody talked about last year. So I was like, crap. I don't know, so I was panicked. I'm serious, I do a lot of talking, but usually I know what I'm doing, and I start panicking, and I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do? So this is what I actually did. In case people here don't speak very much, for those of you who don't speak, this is kind of the way some of us operate. So I started reading my own bio, and I've got it right here. And I'm reading over my bio, and I was like, suddenly I was happy again. So I was like, this is fantastic. I'm reading through it. I've done so much. I've done so many freaking awesome things. And World Bank and Global gave me the first crowdfunding site, and then I taught at all these Ivy League schools, and it was like, it's freaking awesome. It's just, from success to success and accomplishment to accomplishment. And it reminded me that I'd asked somebody what to talk about one other time, and they said, just give a speech that flows like your resume. I remember this. Give a talk that flows like your resume. And I was like, that's excellent. I've got a great story to tell about my resume. And so then I made the mistake of sitting down. I should never have gone to dinner at your house because it screwed everything up. I sat down next to the guy that's going to be speaking next. Jeff, I think. And he's going to be talking about mental health and how to work with people that have mental health challenges. And he was talking about depression and a number of things like that. And I kind of realized at that point that, as he was talking, that my life is not my resume. And it's not been peak to peak. It looks great. If you looked on LinkedIn, I look fantastic. But my book of life you can't read it in my resume. You can't read it in my resume. And, as I look through it now, I realize that my resume is not how my life has actually felt to me, and probably to a lot of people here. And I really can't put it out there. It's like, that's life. That's life. So as I'm looking through my resume, and I'm thinking about my TED Talk tomorrow. My TED Talk, by the way, is going to be about waves of innovation and philanthropy, and how there have been 2 waves, and they've been kind of impressive, but the 3rd wave is coming. And the 3rd wave is so exciting. It's incredibly exciting. And I want to tell you about it. I'm going to have a bunch of slides. And then I'm going to put that TED Talk on my resume. But my resume, even when I do that, it's not my life. So then I had one final, not one final, but I had another setback, because I thought coming in this morning, I prepared a picture of my son and my wife, and I was like, my life is not my CV, but it's my family. It's my kid. A great picture of my kid there. And then Saul puts up this picture of these twins that it's impossible to, there's nothing cuter than that. There's nothing cuter than that, so I had to take that slide off. And so every step of the way, I'm foiled in what I'm going to talk about. So I had a couple more pictures from a trip that I took recently on an ATV trip in West Virginia, and I thought, this is not on my resume, but this is my life. This is my life. This is the most fun thing I have done in the last year. I'm not kidding you. And I've been traveling all over Burma, and I do a lot of interesting things. But a couple months ago, I went on an ATV trip with a bunch of guys, neighbors of mine in West Virginia. And we rode all over the mountains on these abandoned coal mines for 2.5 days, hundreds of miles, with people who I don't work with at all in my daily life. I see them on the weekends. On the weekends, we sit around and shoot the breeze. They don't know anything about BIF or crowdfunding or peer Zipcar or anything like that. And they will never, ever appear on my resume, probably. And that's the fabric, but they're the fabric of my reality. So I felt kind of guilty. I can't wait to tell these guys, by the way, that they're on stage here, because this particular, I don't know if we can go back, but yeah, I mean, they're going to be they're not going to know what this is, but they're going to think it's really cool. So, but one thing that they will, one thing they're going to ask me what I talked about, and I'm going to tell them something that'll be more recognizable to them, which is that my life, aside from my CV here, doesn't feel like going from peak to peak. It's felt like a series of near-death experiences, my life and my career. And I kind of feel like, as I look back on it, that I have been on many roller coasters of where you're sort of at the top, and it feels a little bit like that Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. At the very last Calvin and Hobbes cartoon, I don't know if anybody saw it, where they're like heading off into the unknown on this sled, heading down this hill to explore life. But for me, as soon as you head down that hill, and we went down a lot of hills, you should see, oh my God, speaking of near-death experiences, every single time I've been going down that roller coaster, heading off with Calvin and Hobbes on the slide, I've become very terrified. I have to be totally honest, absolutely terrified. And I've wanted to bail out of the sled. Because Robin talked this morning about these whole new things emerging and new paradigms and things like that. And that's a really absolutely terrifying place to be. And so someone referred to me the other day as a high achiever. This is like a ridiculous thing. And I said, no, I'm not a high achiever. I'm not an achiever. They said, you're an achiever. And I said, you know what? The truth of the reality is I'm not an achiever. I'm a quitter. And they said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I can't be as candid as you can, but I quit Little League in third grade because I wasn't good enough and I made an error, and so I just quit. But even since then, beginning in college, I've tried to quit almost every significant thing I have done. And at each stage, uncannily, there's been somebody there who has kept me from quitting. And I think about in college, I was going to drop out after my first year in college because I was like, I hate. And Greg Katz, my roommate, he's like, Dennis, no, college could be an excellent adventure. You got to stay, and we're going to do some excellent things together. And he convinced me to stay in college. And then I went to grad school, and same thing. I was going to drop out. And I had a girlfriend in grad school. She's like, no, Dennis, you can't drop out. We're going to change the world. And so I was like, okay, let's change the world. And then when I graduated from grad school, this is a true story. I was going to drop out of the workforce. I was not going to work. And my placement counselor convinced me that I should apply for a job at the World Bank. Stop whining, apply for a job at the World Bank. And this is literally how I ended up at the World Bank. She gave me the application for the World Bank. And this has kind of gone on and on. At the World Bank, I tried to quit the World Bank. And a colleague of mine said, no, why don't we revolutionize the World Bank instead of quitting the World Bank? So I was like, okay, let's try it. Let's go for it. And then after that, when that same person and I launched Global Giving, which was crowdfunding before crowdfunding that word even existed, it was going absolutely nowhere fast after like a year. It wasn't like some of the graphics you've seen today. It was looked like an flatline EKG. And my co-founder came back to me one day and she said, good news, I have found somebody who will work with us. And I said, yeah, but we had less than 2 weeks of money in the bank. And she's like, that woman doesn't care. And I said, not only do we not have more than 2 weeks of money in the bank, but we don't even have a business plan. We really don't even know what we're doing. It's like the opposite of Robin's thing, which, is like Zipcar. And that woman was Ellie Stefanski up there, who's there. And Ellie left a prestigious job at Ashoka to come join a startup. And I said to her, I remember we had lunch at that place in Bethesda, LA. I said, I feel like I should tell you that we really have only 11 days of money in the bank. And she's like, I don't care. And I said, how can you not care? And I said, furthermore, we don't know what we're doing. She's like, we can figure it out. So Ellie joined Global Giving in what year was that, Ellie? 2003. And that was the beginning of us figuring it out and of me not quitting. And I don't know, I've probably told you this, Ellie, but hopefully I kept a straight face. Hopefully Ellie did not know that I didn't want to hire Ellie. I wanted to close the operation. I wanted to close the operation. Didn't want to hire Ellie. But Ellie came, and Ellie was part of what's become, the biggest, it was the original and the biggest crowdfunding site for international things. And then I was CEO of that for 10 years, and I got tired, and so I stepped down, and I started a new thing, which I'm working on now, which Saul talked a little bit about, called Feedback Labs. But after 9 months of the startup thing, I'm like, I don't really know whether I have it in me again, and I was thinking about quitting that. And fortunately, I hadn't heard this long thing about, at age 60, doing all the Everest and all that stuff that we heard this morning. But I was talking to my wife, who's co-founder of Global Giving with me, and I said, I think I've had it. I think I'm 55, that's the end of the road, and I'm tired and I'm going to quit. And she didn't say anything to me, and Ellie knows her. She just hands me another cup of coffee. And I threw a fit. I was like, you're not listening to me. It's typical wife that doesn't. I don't know how many of you guys have spouses that don't listen to you, but I was like, you're not freaking listening to me. I'm in pain. I don't want to do this. I'm like I'm throwing a temper tantrum. And she doesn't say anything. She just hands me. She said, did you see this email that just came in? And she hands me this. I've got it here somewhere. I said, no, what is it? So she hands this thing to me. And it's an email from Ellie's successor at Global Giving, who came as an intern when Ellie left us in the lurch, I should say, by leaving. She came as an intern, and it was just like Ellie. She figured out so many problems that we had. And if you look at our growth curve, which is finally going up, this woman, Alexis, who was leaving, she was a big part of that. And my wife said to me, Alexis is leaving. And I said, I can't believe it. The whole thing's going to go to hell. She's like, no, read the email. And this is what the email said. She said, dear team, well, this is it. Brian and I fly to Cairo this afternoon. But first, I wanted to take a moment to say what I failed to say at the staff meeting, which is that I'm so incredibly grateful for the amazing opportunity to have worked at Global Giving over the past 7 years. This team is made up of a group of brilliant, passionate, and driven people who are changing the world for the better. I have learned so much during my time. I think differently because of all of you. Thank you for teaching me never to settle for good enough and to believe that there's always, always a better way to do just about anything as long as you design the right experiment to find it. Thank you for showing me how to listen to the needs of our partners, how to respect the individual dignity of everyone we interact with, and how to champion the underdog. It's really hard to leave a place that surveys you every year to ask how things could be better, a place where we compete over who can make the most delicious food. One of them, we've got some fried chicken there, and where we share blissful moments each week at staff meetings. But don't worry, you haven't seen the last of me. I can't wait to stay involved with Global Giving in one way or another. So please don't hesitate to ask if there's ever anything I can do to help. Love, Alexis. So after getting that from after my wife handed me that and I read it, I decided I can't quit this current startup that I'm doing. One more time, I feel like quitting, and I'm not going to quit. And so I've decided to continue. So that's a little bit of my story, and I'm sorry it's not my TED Talk. I'm sorry it's not glossy. I'm sorry that these guys are not going to appear in any Silicon Valley pitch. These are my friends. That's my life. I really appreciate your having me to be here. Thank you very much.